They say justice is blind, but in the Metropolitan Police Department, it had become something far worse: corrupt, calculated, cruel. A network of officers had been operating under the radar for decades, twisting the system to fit their narrative. They trained rookies to see threats where none existed. To them, enforcing the law wasn't about justice, it was about control. And they thought they had the perfect recruit in Officer Savannah Mitchell: young, ambitious, eager to prove herself, and most importantly, willing to learn their playbook. But one Thursday afternoon, Savannah Mitchell made a mistake that would bring her face to face with a judge unlike any other. She arrested Darnell Washington. To her, he was just another statistic, a routine stop, an easy win. What she couldn't see was that this single act would land her in front of Judge Marcus Carter, the man who had turned his own wrongful imprisonment into a masterclass in exposing police corruption, the man they called the Scale. Because in his courtroom, justice wasn't just blind, it was inevitable. Savannah adjusted her freshly pressed uniform in the rearview mirror of her patrol car, her badge gleaming under the morning sun. She had arrived early, not because she was eager to learn from her seniors, but because she wanted to show them she was already a step ahead. "First solo patrol," she muttered, practicing her confident smile. She had worked for this moment, trained for it. Her father's words echoed in her mind. A badge means authority, and authority means respect. She didn't just want to be a cop, she wanted to command power. At the precinct, Sergeant Thompson, a veteran with 23 years on the force, stopped her. "Mitchell, got a minute before briefing?" She smiled tightly. "Here we go." Another lecture. "Of course, Sergeant." Thompson studied her for a moment before speaking. "Listen, I know you're eager to get out there, but this isn't River Creek anymore. The city is different. Take time to understand the people. Learn the neighborhoods. This job isn't about authority. It's about trust." Savannah's smile didn't waver. "With all due respect, Sergeant, I graduated top of my class. I think I can handle whatever comes my way." Thompson exhaled slowly. That was exactly what he was worried about. Later, during the morning briefing, Lieutenant Chen addressed the officers. "One more thing before assignments," she said. "Judge Marcus Carter is presiding over several of our cases this month." The room fell silent. Veteran officers exchanged knowing looks. "He's fair," Chen continued, "but extremely thorough. No shortcuts, no assumptions. If your paperwork isn't flawless, he'll know." Savannah barely paid attention. It was just paperwork. A judge was a judge, and she had dealt with authority figures her whole life. The morning passed quickly. Savannah wrote 3 traffic tickets, handled a shoplifting call with what she considered appropriate sternness, and even broke up a heated argument between neighbors before it could escalate. Each interaction reinforced her belief that she was made for this job, that she was in control. Then the call came in. Possible disturbance at Marshall Street and 4th. Male subject acting suspiciously near a convenience store. Her radio crackled. Unit 247 responding. Savannah gripped the wheel, excitement surging through her. Finally, a real test. She arrived at the scene, scanning the area. There, standing near the store entrance, was Darnell Washington. Young, black, dressed in business casual, checking his phone. He didn't look nervous, didn't look like he was up to anything, but Savannah saw what she wanted to see. She stepped out of her patrol car, her hand resting on her belt. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from the entrance." Darnell looked up, confused. "Excuse me?" "We received reports of suspicious activity," Savannah stated. "What's your business here?" "I'm waiting for my sister," Darnell replied, keeping his composure. "She works at the dental office next door. We have lunch together every Thursday." Savannah's eyes narrowed. The answer was perfectly reasonable, but something about him made her bristle. In her mind, compliance meant nervous deference. He wasn't nervous, and that was a problem. "I'm going to need to see some ID." "May I ask why?" Darnell's tone was polite. "Director." That was all Savannah needed to hear. "Are you refusing to comply with a lawful order?" she demanded, stepping closer. Darnell blinked. "Number, I'm simply asking." Her voice rose sharply. "Hands where I can see them." A few passers-by stopped. Someone pulled out their phone. The situation was deteriorating. Later, Savannah would claim Darnell made a sudden movement. Video evidence would show him slowly reaching for his wallet and clearly stating his intentions. But in that moment, Savannah saw what she expected to see, what her training had conditioned her to see: a threat. Minutes later, Darnell Washington was in handcuffs, charged with resisting arrest. His sister emerged from the dental office horrified. Her lunch break had turned into a nightmare. Bystanders captured everything on their phones. Back at the precinct, Savannah filed her report. She wrote with confidence, crafting a narrative that painted her as a vigilant officer, and Darnell as a hostile suspect who escalated the situation. Her colleagues read the report, exchanging uneasy glances. "Had to show him how we handle things in the city," she joked. She didn't notice the way Sergeant Thompson and Lieutenant Chen exchanged worried looks, because across town, Darnell's mother was sitting in an office, telling his story to an attorney, and the name on his case file, Judge Marcus Carter, the judge who had spent his life exposing the very corruption Savannah had just stepped into. And in his courtroom, the truth wasn't just a possibility, it was inevitable. The courtroom was silent, tense. Officer Savannah Mitchell sat at the prosecution table, her uniform crisp, her badge polished. But for the first time, she felt something she wasn't used to feeling: doubt. Across the room, Judge Marcus Carter flipped through Darnell Washington's case file. His face betrayed no emotion. Savannah took a deep breath, rehearsing the defense she had prepared. "Stick to the report. Stay confident. The judge will understand. He'll see I was just doing my job." But what she didn't know was that Judge Carter already knew the truth, because sitting on his desk was a USB drive containing multiple angles of video footage that told a very different story from the one Savannah had written. "All rise!" The bailiff's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Judge Carter entered with measured steps, his robe flowing around him, tall, commanding, unshakable. He sat down, adjusting his glasses before scanning the courtroom. "Be seated." The room settled. The weight of what was about to happen hung heavy in the air. "We are here today for the matter of Washington versus the city concerning an arrest made by Officer Savannah Mitchell on Thursday afternoon," Carter said, his voice steady. "Mr. Williams, you may proceed with your motion." Marcus Williams, the defense attorney, rose from his seat, buttoning his suit jacket. His confidence was evident because he had something Savannah didn't: the truth. "Your Honor, we move to dismiss all charges against Mr. Washington and request an immediate investigation into Officer Mitchell's conduct during this arrest. We have video evidence from multiple sources proving that my client was fully compliant and that Officer Mitchell escalated the situation without cause." Savannah's heart pounded. "Objection!" she blurted out, half rising from her chair. The courtroom froze. Judge Carter slowly turned his gaze toward her. "Officer Mitchell," he said, his voice calm but firm. "In my courtroom, objections come from the attorneys, not the witnesses." Savannah's face burned. Beside her, the city's attorney, James Morton, placed a restraining hand on her arm. "No objection, Your Honor. However, we maintain that the videos don't show the complete context of the interaction. We intend to examine that context thoroughly." Judge Carter nodded. "Very well. Mr. Williams, present your evidence." The lights dimmed. A large screen descended from the ceiling. "Let's begin with a bystander's video," Williams said, giving a nod to his assistant. The footage played. Savannah watched herself on screen, her voice sharp, her posture rigid, her hand on her belt, broadcasting authority. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from the entrance." Darnell looked up, confused, calm, cooperative. "Excuse me?" Savannah watched the video play out, just as it had happened, her escalating tone. Darnell reaching for his wallet, slowly, clearly stating his actions. Her shouting, the handcuffs, the gasps in the courtroom told her that everyone saw the same thing. Then Williams spoke. "Now, let's compare this to Officer Mitchell's body cam footage." Another video, another angle. Savannah felt her pulse skyrocket. She had reviewed the footage before, but watching it now, with Judge Carter's eyes locked on her, was different. Officer Mitchell claims in her report that Mr. Washington exhibited suspicious behavior for several minutes before she approached him, Williams narrated. but the video shows she initiated contact within seconds of arriving. The room whispered. Morton shifted uncomfortably beside her. Judge Carter remained silent, watching, listening, waiting. Williams continued, his voice razor-sharp. Additionally, Officer Mitchell stated that she received a dispatch call reporting suspicious activity. However, he lifted another document. We've subpoenaed the dispatch records. The complaint came from a payphone, and when investigators followed up, he paused. They found no one in the area who actually witnessed any suspicious behavior. The courtroom fell into complete silence. Savannah gripped the edge of the table. Her face burned. She hadn't expected them to trace the call. She had seen Darnell from her patrol car and decided he looked out of place. The dispatch call in her report was an afterthought, a fabrication to justify what she had already chosen to do. Judge Carter finally spoke. "Mr. Morton, does the city wish to respond to this allegation?" Morton tugged at his collar. We need time to verify the dispatch records, Your Honor." Carter made a note on his pad. "Very well. Mr. Williams, continue." The morning turned into a slow-motion nightmare for Savannah. Williams dismantled her report, piece by piece. More witnesses came forward. The store owner testified that Darnell was a regular customer. Darnell's sister's supervisor confirmed their weekly lunch plans. A jogger who happened to pass by had video from another angle. Every story matched, every detail aligned, except for Savannah's report. During a recess, Morton pulled Savannah aside. "This is bad," he whispered. "You told me you had probable cause. You told me the videos would support your story." Savannah crossed her arms. "They're just twisting things. That's what defense attorneys do, right?" Morton stared at her. "Officer Mitchell, I'm going to recommend the city settle this case. And if I were you, I'd start thinking very carefully about what you're going to say when Judge Carter calls you to testify." Savannah's stomach twisted. "I'm not lying." But the words tasted bitter. Back in the courtroom, Judge Carter called Darnell to the stand. Savannah watched him. For the first time, she really saw him. Not as a suspect, not as a threat, but as a man who never should have been here. Williams questioned him. "Mr. Washington, have you ever had previous interactions with law enforcement?" "No, sir," Darnell replied. "I've never been arrested, never even had a traffic ticket. I'm an accountant. I was just waiting for my sister, like I do every Thursday." Savannah swallowed hard. She had painted him as aggressive, defiant, a danger. But the man sitting on the stand was calm, articulate, innocent. Williams continued. "And how has this incident affected you?" Darnell hesitated. Then, his voice cracked slightly. "I used to believe that if you followed the rules, you'd be okay. But now I feel nervous every time I see a patrol car. I had to explain to my nieces why their uncle was in handcuffs. How do you explain something like that to children?" In the gallery, his mother stifled a sob. Savannah felt something she hadn't expected. Guilt. For the first time, she wasn't sure if she was the hero of this story, or if she had always been the villain. Savannah Mitchell had spent her entire career believing she was in control, that the badge on her chest made her untouchable. But now, as she sat in the witness box under the unrelenting gaze of Judge Marcus Carter, she felt something she had never felt before. Exposed. Savannah shifted in her seat, trying to maintain the confidence that had always come so easily. But the weight of undeniable evidence was crushing her. And then Marcus Williams, the defense attorney, spoke. "Officer Mitchell, in your report, you claimed Mr. Washington made a sudden, threatening movement that forced you to react accordingly. Is that correct?" Savannah cleared her throat. "Yes, sir." Williams nodded. "Let's take another look at the footage." The screen flickered to life again. From 3 different angles, the courtroom watched the moment play out. Darnell calmly reaching into his pocket, Savannah shouting for him to freeze, his visible confusion, his slow, deliberate movements, the handcuffs snapping onto his wrists. Not a single aggressive action, not a single sudden movement. Only a man who had been treated as guilty from the moment Savannah laid eyes on him. Savannah felt heat rise in her face. She had told herself the report was accurate, that her perception of the event was what mattered. But perception didn't change reality. And now, everyone in the courtroom saw the truth. Judge Carter leaned forward, his voice calm but cutting. Officer Mitchell, your report stated that Mr. Washington posed a direct threat to you. Do you still stand by that statement? Savannah's throat went dry. She wanted to double down, to hold her ground. But something about the way the judge was watching her, like he had already weighed her in his mind and found her lacking, made her hesitate. She glanced at the jury, at the Washington family, at the cameras recording every second of this. Then she exhaled. No, sir. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Even Williams looked momentarily surprised. Excuse me? Judge Carter asked, his eyebrows raising slightly. Savannah clenched her fists, forcing herself to say the words she had avoided for days. I may have misinterpreted his actions. Williams pounced. Misinterpreted or fabricated? Savannah's stomach dropped. Judge Carter's tone sharpened. Officer Mitchell, you are under oath. Did Mr. Washington make a threatening movement, or did you lie in your report? The silence stretched. The pressure weighed down on her. And then, barely above a whisper, she finally admitted it. No, Your Honor. Mr. Washington did not make a threatening movement. I wrote what I thought would justify the arrest. The courtroom erupted, whispers, shocked glances. Someone in the gallery let out an audible gasp. Savannah's entire world shattered in that moment. The badge she had once polished with pride felt like an anchor around her neck. Judge Carter's face was unreadable. Given this admission, he said slowly, this court is adjourned for today. Mr. Morton, I expect the city's motion to dismiss all charges against Mr. Washington on my desk within the hour. Additionally, I am ordering a full investigation into Officer Mitchell's conduct, both in this case and in any previous arrests she has made. His gaze turned to Savannah. Officer Mitchell, remain in my chambers. We need to discuss the consequences of perjuring yourself in my courtroom. Savannah couldn't move. Her ears rang. She had spent years believing she was in the right. And now, her career, her reputation, her future, everything was falling apart. Savannah sat alone in a courthouse stairwell. Her hands trembled as she tried to process what had just happened. She had always thought herself a hero, but maybe she had been the villain all along. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Sergeant Thompson appeared, watching her for a moment before sitting beside her. Mitchell? She looked up. Her eyes were red. I never meant... Thompson exhaled. I know, but meaning to hurt someone and hurting them anyway? Sometimes that's worse, because it means you didn't even think about them enough to realize how much damage you were doing. Savannah stared at the floor. For the first time, she truly understood, and she hated what she saw in herself. The truth was out. Savannah Mitchell had lied, and now she was out of options. The courtroom had witnessed her confession, and Judge Carter wasn't about to let it slide. The only question left was, what would be her punishment? Savannah sat frozen in her seat. The weight of the judge's words crushed her. Her career, her reputation, her future, all of it, gone. And as she watched Darnell Washington and his family embrace, a sick feeling settled in her stomach. She had stolen something from him, his dignity, his freedom, his peace of mind. And for what? Because she saw what she wanted to see. But the consequences weren't over yet. The next morning, Judge Carter didn't waste time. Before we proceed with any sentencing, this court will investigate not just Officer Mitchell, but the entire system that enabled her misconduct. The words sent shockwaves through the courtroom. This wasn't just about Savannah anymore. This was about every officer like her, every technical glitch that erased body cam footage, every complaint that had mysteriously vanished, every innocent person who had been treated like a criminal. And then, Detective Sarah Martinez took the stand. The courtroom held its breath, because what she revealed next would change everything. Your Honor, Martinez began, our investigation has uncovered evidence that Officer Mitchell's actions were not an isolated incident. She handed a thick stack of files to the judge. Judge Carter flipped through them, his expression darkening with each page. Over 40 cases, Martinez continued, where officers, just like Mitchell, exaggerated threats, falsified reports, and escalated situations unnecessarily. But it gets worse. The room fell silent. We have evidence that body cam footage from multiple officers was intentionally corrupted. Judge Carter leaned forward. Explain. Detective Martinez gestured to James Phillips, the IT manager, who nervously stepped forward. The glitches that caused missing footage weren't accidents. A murmur rippled through the crowd. It was a program, Phillips admitted, his voice shaky, designed to target and erase certain officers' recordings while leaving the metadata intact, so it looked like a system error. Judge Carter's jaw clenched. Who authorized this? Phillips hesitated, then said a name that made the entire courtroom gasp. Captain Robert Drake. Captain Drake, the man responsible for protecting corrupt officers, was about to face justice. Judge Carter wasted no time. I am authorizing an immediate subpoena for Captain Drake's records. If the allegations against him hold, he will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And then he turned to Savannah. Her breath caught in her throat. This was it. Judge Carter studied her. Savannah's hands clenched into fists in her lap. Officer Savannah Mitchell, he began. Her chest tightened. You entered my courtroom believing yourself above the law. Savannah lowered her gaze. You falsified reports, escalated a peaceful encounter, and arrested an innocent man on nothing but suspicion and bias. Darnell's family watched. She could feel their eyes burning into her. For this, I have no choice but to order the immediate termination of your employment with the Metropolitan Police Department. A wave of whispers spread through the room. Savannah swallowed hard. It was over. She had lost everything. But then, Judge Carter continued. Additionally, he said, I am recommending that the district attorney's office pursue charges against you for falsifying a police report and wrongful arrest. Savannah's stomach dropped. She wasn't just losing her badge. She was facing prison time. The media exploded. Headlines blared, corrupt officer exposed in court, shocking body, cam footage released. Judge Carter demands full investigation into police misconduct. City officials scrambled to contain scandal. In the days that followed, protests erupted. People demanded change. Darnell Washington and his attorney filed a massive lawsuit against the department. And as for Savannah, she stood alone outside the courthouse, reporters shouting questions. She didn't answer, because for the first time in her life, she had nothing left to say. Justice had been served, but this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning, because one judge, one case, one exposed lie, had sparked a revolution, a reckoning, and it would change the system forever. What do you think? Should Savannah go to prison, or is her termination enough? Comment below. Subscribe for more real-life courtroom drama. Don't miss our next episode, where another officer gets caught in a cover-up.